on. This is ridiculous. This is not the CIA. The ego on these guys has gotten to the point where I talked about in college football. They don't let quarterbacks do anything in college football. The egos are so out of fucking whack. Yeah. And the funny thing is, the Cowboys aren't game planning for any of those 6 players I mentioned. Any of them. They're worried about Jalen Carter and Zach Bond and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper, etc. Those are the guys they're game planning about. Not the parts you're concerned about. Whatever.
I don't think it's going to change. Yeah, I don't think it's going to change.
The one thing that did change, obviously.
Vic is normally very open and honest, and it's a joy to listen to his press conferences. And
Not yesterday.
Yesterday, he's hitting you guys with, that's a Nick question. That's a Howie question. I'm like, oh, man, they got the Vic. They let him know early. So good stuff there, Johnny Mac. John, a couple days out from this game now, 2 days and 12 hours. It's 8:22 in the morning right now. So almost exactly 2 days and 12 hours, that game will be set to kick off the NFL season opener for 2025. Let's bring in our boy now, John Machota, who covers the Dallas Cowboys for The Athletic. John, me and John have been discussing. That must be a fun job covering the Dallas Cowboys with all the things they have going on. Let's bring him up right now. You can follow him on X at John Machota and read all his work at The Athletic. John, welcome to the show, man. How you doing on this Tuesday morning?
I'm doing well, and it is fun. I will say they keep me very busy.
Yes, they do.
Not covering any Super Bowl runs, but a lot of drama.
Well, I always say, we're up against it here, John. I always say with, all the stuff Howie does. He made 5 August trades. We're always, looking at our phone and bang, we got to do something. But
can I jump in on that real quick?
Yeah.
I'm envious in that way because I will say this. I've been covering the Cowboys. This will now be my 15th season. And while I think there's a lot of things that the Cowboys do well organizationally, they've never been on the level where the Eagles, and particularly since Howie Roseman's been running the show there. And I'm so envious of that, to be covering something where you're like, this is the best of the best. Let me just go with what they're saying. They know what they're doing. Let's roll. Where covering the Cowboys, there's always second guessing about everything, where you're just like, is this the best move for the team, or is this a move that's being done because of publicity and getting people talking? Like, there is something that, and as much as Bill did get boat race yesterday for North Carolina, that I'm envious of those Patriots years where it was like, he didn't give you anything and his press conferences sucked, but at least when you were covering it, you're like, okay, I know I'm covering, like, this is greatness right now. Like, this is
working. Exactly.
Yeah. What I'll have to hang my hat on over the last 15 years is that I don't think there will be more Jerry Joneses coming down the line in sports. And so I'll always have that. I was around Jerry Jones for 15, 20 years, however long it is that he lives. And that I'll always have those references to, well, anytime anybody thinks something's crazy, I'll be like, well, I did cover Jerry Jones for a little bit.
Right.
But outside of that, I am envious of being able to cover something where you're like, no, absolutely. This team does everything to turn over every stone and find any possible way to take an advantage. And my biggest one that for the Eagles with me is that when they make a mistake, they move on quick.
They move on very quickly.
It's very admirable.
I try to talk about how he's greatness, but there are times I don't know, because I got signed out of my co-host account. I didn't even know you were in the green room. But I will say this. I don't know how early you popped on, but there's nonsense about who's starting. I don't know. Brian Johnson is Brian Schottenheimer. I'm talking about the Eagles' old offensive coordinator, is worried about Adoree Jackson versus Jacorian Bennett. I mean, the absurdity of the subterfuge. And Vic Fangio used to be this breath of fresh air, John. And said, you ask him a question. You don't have to get him talking. You just ask him what you want to know, and he answer it. Not yesterday. So there are little things that I try to point out. Yes, Howie's great. Yes, the Eagles try to uncover every rock. But his reputation has gotten to the point, I think he's in people's heads. Now, I think when he does make 5 August trades and it's for Jacorian Bennett and Sam Howell, they're like, oh, look at these moves. He's playing 3D chess. Yeah. I'm like, but Sam Howell, Kevin O'Connell's the guy. I say this all the time, John. he's the guy with quarterbacks in this league. Everybody wants to work with him. He's got all these, Sam Darnold's success. He made Josh Dobbs look good for a short period. He's got this big reputation. He looked at Sam Howell for 4 months and said, yeah, I don't want that guy. I want Carson Wentz. So there are little layers of it where you say, all right, Howie deserves all his flowers as you just gave him, but sometimes he doesn't deserve the flowers for every single move. What you did say, though, when he makes mistakes, he moves on quickly. Bryce Huff, perfect example last year. Blatant mistake, he moved on quickly. That part of it, 100%. And I go all the way back. We got to start with Micah, with you. Why was this different? We all know Jerry's playbook. He's going to pay them in the end. Is this just the case of the players like, I don't want to be involved with this? What was the breaking point here?
I don't really put a heavy weight on the whole player side of this in this deal. I mean, Micah Parsons can say whatever he wants. There's no way. Just being around Micah Parsons the last 4 years, there's no way he wanted to leave Dallas. And I'm not saying about because it was going to give him the best chance to get a ring. I'm talking like Micah Parsons is the player version of Jerry Jones. He loves the publicity. He loves people paying attention to him. It has had to be so difficult for him. Forget not playing on the field, not doing his podcast, not talking to the media. Like, I mean, those are things that Micah Parsons loves. So I don't buy the fact, like, I fully believe that he would, if he could get a contract even close, it didn't have to be as good as the Packers contract. Anything even close to that in Dallas, he would have been more than happy to stick around and remain with the Dallas Cowboys. I think what happened with Jerry Jones is that this is a small part of it, but just because you mentioned it, I do think that everyone constantly saying, well, they're just going to pay these guys. They always do. Yeah. Jerry doesn't move on from superstars. I think that was a factor. It's just like, this is how sports are. It's never one thing. It's a culmination. I think that's a factor. I think him paying the wrong players, giving guys contract extensions that maybe they didn't really feel like, looking back on it, they should have. Ezekiel Elliott could be one where, there was a long holdout there. I think there's a lot of things where he's looked at stuff in the past where he's trying not to make the same mistakes maybe. And then I just think behind the scenes that things have gotten sour between not just Jerry, but kind of the organization and Micah Parsons. And I guess the best way I can describe it to you is there aren't many people in the organization, from front office, coaching staff to players, where I really feel we're banging the table that Micah can't leave, and when I say that, I mean, like, CeeDee Lamb seems like that. Trayvon Diggs is one of his best friends. But I don't get the sense that there's all these people in the organization who are just like, Jerry, what are you doing? Like it's the 2014 draft and everybody's like, we're taking Zach Martin, right? And Jerry's like, no. What about this Johnny Manziel thing? I don't think it's that. There's even a part of me that thinks that maybe Jerry could have been one of the last people talked into doing this, that Jerry was the one hanging on, because I don't buy all the whole, he's mad that he had a handshake deal and Micah's backing out of this. I don't, you can use that as an example of where things went sour, but I do not believe that is that was the tipping point. If that's a tipping point, those conversations happened in March. You could have done this before the draft in April, gotten more, probably didn't have to send him to just an awful, that's one of the things for me. I
say the same thing, John. That is the worst team to send him to.
I don't live in a world of where I saw a lot of these tweets and a lot of these hot takes from national writers, reporters saying you never trade generational talent pass rusher. Yeah, you shouldn't, but I will not go never. There's plenty of things I can tell you that would make me say, oh, no, I can do it. Here's my thing, though. You got to do it. You got to get more in return, and you do not send him to the Green Bay Packers. You just cannot do that. So those are the two things I'm critical of, but I am not on that side of just, well, you absolutely cannot do this. Honestly, it's not even about pass rusher. I only think there's maybe 5-6 guys in the entire league that I say, no matter what goes behind the scenes, whatever. And it's probably mostly quarterbacks.
Yeah. What do you think the ripple effect of this is going to be, John? I mean, look, the player has the personality he has that you pointed out, but the reality is he's one of the best players in the NFL. He really is. Well, what's been the ripple effect that you've seen so far? And then kind of just trying to extrapolate that out into the future. Like, to me, I said on the show, looks like the Cowboys waved the white flag to me a week before the season started, and they send one of their best players to the Green Bay Packers for 2 ones. I'm like, geez, they don't think they can compete this year. That was my perspective. What do you think the ripple effect's been inside that locker room?
completely agree with you. The randomness, though, of it is my 15 years covering the team. 2 of the best seasons I've seen have come off of exactly the scenarios you're saying. Usually when the Cowboys are being picked by a lot of people, or, there's a lot of the expectations, which has been the most of this last 15 years, that they never meet. But 2014, when that was one of the only times I've ever heard Jerry Jones at a press conference before training camp saying that we got an uphill battle here. They moved on from DeMarcus Ware at that time, and they were not thinking that they were going to be very good. And that's one of the best seasons they've had in the last 25, 30 years. And then 2016, Romo goes down in the preseason, and you thought that they would go for a veteran backup because Kellen Moore had gotten hurt. And they're like, no, we're going to go with Dak Prescott, this 4th-round pick. And they ended up having maybe the best season of the last 20 or 30 years for them. So there is that part of me where I don't, just because I've covered this team, that I'm not completely shutting the door on them surprising people, but it's very unlikely. I mean, it's much more likely that this is a, 5-6 win team that has a top 10 pick, maybe top 5 pick, which doesn't really happen very often in Dallas. That's been the problem. Like, the Cowboys are stuck in the middle. Like, they haven't been good enough to win it all roster wise, but they're never bad enough long enough to build up the capital to where you can build like what the Lions have right now, where it's most of that's done outside of Goff through the draft. They haven't really been that bad. So I think what they're doing is they're getting set up to where they're going to be picking pretty high. And that's the other thing about that deal with the Packers. Like, that Packers pick is not going to be a high pick at all.
It's like, what, 25 to 32, best case 25, maybe 32, literally, because I think it makes them a legitimate Super Bowl contender. Now, last one on Mike is the fact you kind of brought up. I from the outside, I have tremendous respect for Will McClay, one of the best personnel guys in this league. And he's got to deal with Jerry and all that kind of stuff to build this roster. So I've always had tremendous respect for him. So this thought that, they get back Kenny Clark, who's been a good player in this league. They need run stoppers. It hasn't worked out with Mozzie Smith to date. Obviously, you're in a division with Saquon Barkley, the best rushing attack in the NFL, at least in Baltimore in the equation, but certainly in the conversation. So there's that thought that maybe they match up a little bit better with the Eagles. Are you buying any of that? Because I'm not. I'm just not.
No, I think there's a big gap between now with the Packers getting Parsons. To me, it's Packers, Eagles, Lions, and then everybody else in the NFC. So no, I don't. And then the Cowboys could very well be a bottom 5 team in the NFC. So I look at the NFC East.
But just the philosophy of we have to stop the run, or is this just complete spin and hey, we got to make this into something?
No. It's been one of their biggest weaknesses, and it's because they haven't been able to find, they haven't been able to come close to finding their Jalen Carter. It's. I mean, literally, when I said to you at the beginning about Howie moving on, the number one person I'm thinking about is Mozzie Smith in Dallas. You used a 1st-round pick on him, so you're just committed that they're going to try and make this work. And it was to the point where he's even playing in the 3rd preseason game on a team that's not playing really any starters at all in that 3rd preseason game, and he's playing throughout the entire first half. I mean, it was very clear he was a roster bubble guy. And so their investments at defensive tackle really haven't worked out. Osa Odighizuwa is a pretty good player. I think he's in line to probably have his best season. And then if Kenny Clark can stay healthy, this is the best they'll be at defensive tackle in 15 years, probably since they had Jay Ratliff. I mean, they have not had any success in the middle of that defense, and that has been a big issue. But Kenny Clark's going to be 30. We're not going to sit here and act like, oh, well, this is a move because he's Jalen Carter's age. This is a move that this should probably impact you for a couple of years, but now you still are going to have to find somebody else going forward. So it helps you right now, but it almost doesn't even look like your window is to win right now. Like when you move on from Micah Parsons, I don't know how much that window is right now, as opposed to the window looks like it's maybe in another 5 years.
What's their edge rushing room look like now post Micah Parsons? I know they got Sam Williams over there. That's, I guess, expected to kind of replace Micah. That's a big ask on Sam Williams. What do you make of that room now without Micah Parsons? Because the interior got better, but the edges got worse.
Absolutely. And there's nobody on the team that's even close to Micah Parsons. No doubt about that. And there's nobody that's going to draw the double and triple teams that Micah did that opened stuff up for everybody else.
Right.
but I don't think it's a weakness. It's not the strength that it was. They don't have
No,
Micah Parsons. They don't have
they have
DeMarcus
good
Ware.
players. Yeah.
Yeah, the
Dante
Donovan
Ford.
Ezeraku, this kid they got out of Boston College in the second round, like he's got a potential of probably not his rookie year, but he does have potential down the line to be a double-digit sack type guy. And then Dante Fowler, I still think has some tread left on the tire after having that 10.5 sack season last year for Washington. Yeah. And then Sam Williams, as long as he stays healthy, he's been a guy that even like when Mike McCarthy was coaching, he would talk about how the upside is there. Like Sam is a special player talent-wise. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. And then Marshawn Nealon is a second-round pick they drafted a year ago. And so they'll be okay there. The reason I'd say that I think it's better than people think is because when Micah gets traded, Jerry says at the press conference that night that don't think that we're just saving these picks for the future. We could use them right now to upgrade the roster. And that got a lot of people saying, oh, well, that they're going to go after an edge rusher now. And I don't believe that at all. Corner and running back would be much higher on my list than edge rusher. So certainly not anything like having Micah Parsons. Don't get me wrong, but it's not as bad as I think people think it's going to be.
All right. Well, let's talk about corner from the perspective of Trayvon Diggs coming back, full participant, and Tyler Guyton. So I'll go both sides. That's a surprise. I mean, when Tyler went down, you thought ACL. There were reports earlier. Then it's 4 to 6 weeks, whatever it was, the fractured something. And they're full participants. Is there a chance both are going to play on Thursday night?
Yeah, there's a chance. I would say Diggs is more likely than Guyton. Diggs saying yesterday he thinks it's 75, 80% chance he plays, which is mind-blowing to me because the knee procedure he had back in January is one where a lot of people, including people in the organization, thought this is going to be something where he's probably out for he opens the season on PUP. He's not playing in those first 4 weeks. And then it just, even like the last week and a half, we were out in California where the Cowboys do their first 4 weeks of training camp. He just kept doing more and more off to the side, and it was moving really well. And it was just interesting to compare it to Savon Ravel, who was their corner they took in the third round, who also was coming off a knee injury that he suffered at East Carolina. And the expectation is that he would participate in training camp. And it was almost like you've just seen like Trayvon Diggs passing him, where I was just like, wow, this is bizarre that it looks like Diggs is closer to being ready. So if he does play, though, how well is he going to play and how much can he play for? Because, I mean, this is a guy who hasn't done anything really in practice. He's trying to catch up, like, by going with the scout team and doing extra stuff in practice this week, like going against George Pickens, going against CeeDee Lamb. But I just think it's a tall task to put him out there without doing any preseason, really anything at training camp and being like, oh, here, you got A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith right now. I mean, that's a lot to ask of him. And so, but I still think he's more likely. I think Nate Thomas ends up starting at left tackle for the Cowboys, who he's a second-year guy, but he's been a guy that they've really liked a lot. He was going to be their swing tackle. I think they give Guyton another week before they bring him back.
John, how much do you think the addition of George Pickens is going to do for this team? Philly fans are tough on Dak Prescott, and I've always said you can pick on him for the playoff lack of success, but the guy can throw the ball, and you had a big target in George Pickens. How much do you think he impacts the offense this year for the Cowboys?
Yeah, when we got out to training camp, like the rapport between Dak and CD, I mean, literally looked like they had just finished the season the week before. I mean, it just was hitting exactly like you'd expect. CD was obviously thrilled to be there because he missed all of that portion of camp last year in his contract holdout. So it was just like, to compare the two, I was just like, yeah, George just isn't on that level with Dak yet. But as camp went along, that's when you started to see, you're like, oh, yeah, they're clicking. Because it's interesting. There's been the other receivers the Cowboys have added, and I don't think that Brandon Cooks was the best fit for Dak. Whereas like when they traded for Amari Cooper, man, like him and Dak, even it was during the bye week, they hit the ground running right away. And so Dak and George Pickens are certainly on the same page now. Like I can't wait to watch that more than anything in this game, like that first half, because all I've had to go off of is really when they've practiced against the Rams, because they're not playing any of their starters in the preseason. And that's why when you guys were talking earlier about, the way Vic was talking and the way Nick was talking and keeping stuff like kind of close to the vest, part of me was like, I wonder if that's a little bit of gamesmanship too, because the Cowboys have gone out of their way not to show anything. And Brian Schottenheimer's been very open about, well, this is our best advantage, because they don't know exactly what we're going to do, so we're not going to show everything. That's the biggest advantage we have going in this game. But when you asked about George, the first thing I thought of was like, I think he's going to have a big year. It's a contract year for him. And I think the Cowboys are going to be behind in a lot of games. So they're going to have to throw the ball a lot. So I see, like, if I'm talking to anybody right now that's listening fantasy wise, I would absolutely trying to get in CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. I think they're going to both put up big numbers.
Well, I agree with you, John, from the perspective of that's how coaches think. That week one, you have a lot of unscouted looks, a lot of change. There's always turnover in the NFL. It's about 30% at least for every roster. With the Cowboys, you have a new head coach, Brian Schottenheimer, new defensive coordinator, Matt Eberflus. Now, Nick and Matt know each other very well from their days in Indy together. So a lot of gamesmanship, I think, going on from that perspective. What are your early thoughts on Brian Schottenheimer? A lot of criticism. Hey, we went through this in 2021 where everybody was making fun, and nobody who knew who Nick was. Very few people outside the industry knew who Nick was. He wasn't a high-level candidate. Only interview he got was for the Eagles. Had a terrible first press conference. Still the end of the COVID era. Was on Zoom. Didn't connect with people. Looked awful. And you know, he's 4 for 4 in playoffs, 2 Super Bowl berths, Super Bowl championship. I wouldn't pull the plug on Brian Schottenheimer is what I'm trying to say. Your early thoughts on him as the head coach and Matt with that defense. I love Mike Zimmer, but I think the game kind of passed him by a little bit. I think they're going to be better on defense just for the addition of Matt Eberflus.
So with Brian, see, this is the thing about the Cowboys head coaching job. Like, there's that Jerry Jones piece that makes it different from everyone else. And so while this wouldn't be something I would really consider with other jobs, part of my evaluation of him is how does he handle that? How does he handle those distractions? And he is wired for that. And I think that has been one of his greatest strengths. Like, even talking about the Parsons trade and things like that at the press conference, like, there's nothing about him that seems like he feels like he's rushed. Like, he completely seems like he's in control, in control of the chaos that comes with being the Dallas Cowboys head coach. So that's why, like, I think there's a lot of good coaches in the NFL that wouldn't have success in Dallas because of that part where they're like great X's and O's, great football guys, but then it's like, oh yeah, no. We'll get to the football stuff in a second, but we got to ask you about this, and this, and that can burn you out. And so that part, I just have to bring it up because it is real. Like, that is not some just, talk show thing. Like, that is real, and it's going to heat up even more. I mean, Jerry's about to start doing his 2 radio interviews a week. He's going to be talking after a game. Yeah. He will talk after. How many coaches? Coaches would love? It's
awesome, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is great for us. But if you're a head coach, do you love the fact that you're going to go to your post-game press conference, especially after home games, and most of us will be talking to Jerry Jones, while you're talking to the other reporters that go to that, and so because of that, I think he's handled everything really well. The only questions I have is that there's a lot on his plate being the head coach and offensive play caller. And so that remains to be seen how that goes. You could possibly be critical of the coaching staff hires because it's a very young staff. There's several coaches that are coming from the college ranks. And so there could be some bumps in the road early on with that. And hey, like I said about the preseason thing, like, maybe that backfires on them. Maybe they should have played some of these guys in the preseason as opposed to being like, oh, well, let's go against the defending Super Bowl champs. And unless they're looking at this game of like, well, we probably aren't going to win that one anyway. So we can show everything and we can work through the kinks in that game. And then we'll be ready to go for the Giants week 2. They're not saying that, but that's just my own belief in how lopsided I think this game is going to be. But up to this point, I don't know how you can't say like if I go with the letter grade thing, I don't know how anybody would give him an F or a D or even a C. Like, I mean, up to this point, what he's done, all things considered, I don't think you could have handled the stuff any better than he has.
Good stuff there for Schottenheimer. John, where do you think this team is right now as compared to the NFC East? I think at the top right now, you got the Eagles and the the Commanders, who've kind of separated themselves. The Commanders obviously did what they did last year. Eagles did what they did. And then at the bottom, you have the Giants. And the Cowboys have kind of teetered between the top tier and the bottom tier in this division. Do you think they're closer to the Eagles and the Commanders right now, or are they closer to the Giants and potentially even a full-blown rebuild at some point in the next couple of years? Where do you think they are right now coming into this year?
You guys can disagree. Anybody watching this can disagree with me. I'm a person of like, I am not a 1 year make all these bold statements after seeing 1 year. So I've been like that my whole entire life when it comes to sports. And so I need to see more from Washington before I put them up there. Like that's one season. Everything seemed to go great for them. Even when things weren't going well, all of a sudden things bounced their way. And so I'm not saying that they can't be on that level, but I need to see more. So I don't put them on the level of the Eagles. The Eagles are on the one tier by themselves. Then it's the Commanders. Then it's the Cowboys under there. And then I have the Giants. And again, the Giants, just because it's not a 1 year thing. It's been like this for a long time, to where when I started covering the Cowboys, I looked at the Giants as that's like one of the best organizations in football, to where now it's like, I don't know, maybe they'll be good in the next 3 or 4 years. Maybe they're what they are. I mean, that one I keep going back to is really ties into the Eagles. The fact that they moved on from Saquon Barkley. And if you're Jerry Jones with this Micah Parsons thing, you better have that in the back of your mind when you made this move, that you could be doing the Saquon Barkley with the Packers, where you're giving this guy up and he's the piece that puts them over the top. And you guys are sitting there left, like looking like, yeah, maybe we should have put up with a little bit of the stuff behind the scenes. This is a huge disaster for us. But I think the Cowboys are third right now, but I don't think they're going to have a great season. I think they're going to be drafting high. I think they're going to have a lot of draft capital to make moves. And to your point that you said earlier, John, Will McClay is one of the strongest pieces in the organization. And the way this organization has been built over the last, 5-10 years, maybe even longer, is we're going to draft well. We're not going to do much in free agency or trades of adding players from other teams to fill in the middle, the gaps. And then when we draft well, we'll pay those guys. So we're top heavy, and then we're drafting well. That's where Will's at. And that middle part is what has held the Cowboys back. And as great as the Eagles are at the top, I believe that their middle is very strong too. And that's where you get them in a position where you're just like, this team's going to be competing for a long time. That middle has been missing. And it's almost like, well, we'll pay our top guys. We'll take care of that. We'll pull us out of the dirt with another strong draft.
Yeah. I get that feeling with the Eagles this year, but it's big defensively because the Eagles pay everybody on offense. Part of that is circumstance, John. Just all their superstars are on offense and are a little bit older. And their defense, they've drafted very well, to your point, and they don't have to pay. But it's coming with Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith after this season, potentially Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. So it's going to have to shift a little bit, and it's going to be interesting to see how the Cowboys
or they might let some good players walk.
Yeah, well, they already have
like Carter walk, but after that, you got to make tough decisions.
Yeah, and they already have.
Again, going back to what I do compared to what you guys do, you have to have the confidence, though. You've seen that Howie will fill in those gaps. Yeah. That's the thing about the Cowboys. You just don't feel that you're that confident they're going to fill in the gaps.
Right.
At John Machota, make sure you follow John on the X platform. For my money, the best Dallas Cowboys reporter in the business. You can read him at The Athletic, his podcast, One Star Cowboys. So you can listen to him there as well. You mentioned, because this also resonated with me with Nick Sirianni. When Nick first got here, he was the play caller, and he said too much, and he had to hand it off to Shane Steichen at the time. I don't know if that's going to happen with Brian. I doubt it, because very few coaches have the ego to turn that down. But in general, you look at their offensive coordinator, he'd be the next guy, presumably. Clayton Adams, who is interesting to me because he was an NFL guy, but he was an offensive line coach in Arizona. I believe he was going to be the Stanford head coach and then turned back to become the Cowboys offensive coordinator. That's amazing. You don't often see that offensive line coach go to offensive coordinator. What have your impressions been of him? Because he'll be a big part of building that offense with Brian Schottenheimer.
So for me, I will say that I believe they brought in Clayton to help fix their run game issues.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah,
they could also probably fix run game issues by, I don't know, maybe
getting
investing
a
in the
great
position.
running back.
You know what I'm saying? Like again, like when I say about the
right.
Micah thing, the overcorrection, like the results of things that have happened in the past. It's like they get Zeke. It obviously worked early on, and then they paid him, and it didn't work after that. And so it was like we invested too heavy on running back, and they're almost like overcorrecting to like they're not going to invest anything in running back. So it's like he's part of bringing him in is part of fixing that run game. But also for me, going to your point about, giving up the play calling, like especially being down here in Texas, there's not a lot, but there's people that talk about like with Steve Sarkisian taking the Texas job. He got that job because of his offensive play calling. That's his greatest strength. Brian Schottenheimer, a lot of similarities. That's what his strength is. If Mike McCarthy stays, I believe Brian Schottenheimer is the OC calling the plays. I believe that Jerry was going to, and I also think that if Jerry didn't hire Brian, I think it was going to be Kellen Moore part 2, where the next head coach was going to get Brian as the offensive coordinator anyway. So when you're going in those meetings where Jerry's talking about being the offensive play caller, and it starts heating up to the point where you're coming in for a second meeting and you're going, oh, wow, I think I got a chance to be the head coach. You're certainly not going to tell him in those meetings, yeah, let me just be the walk-around head coach. We're going to hire somebody else. You want me as the offensive play caller, so you're not going to give that up. So you bring in Clayton Adams. He hasn't called plays before. So there's also not that guy where you're just like, if things don't go well early, where people like myself and others are asking, hey, are you going to be handing this thing off? Like we asked, obviously, Mike McCarthy, and often a lot of head coaches are asked, like when things aren't going well. That's the thing about this staff. Like anybody that thinks that this is going to be like one of these, oh, yeah, it'll just be 1 year. If it's a disaster, it'll move on. No, they won't. Brian Schottenheimer will be the head coach of the Cowboys. He will get at least 2 years, and probably I'm confident to say he'll get at least 3. With how confident and comfortable Jerry was in 9 years of Jason Garrett, like I just do not see him moving on unless somebody comes along that like, and I don't know who that would be. He could have gotten Bill Belichick. He could have gotten Deion Sanders. Like,
too big a name, man. He wants to be the star. He's not. I don't think he's.
He wants to be the star, but he also doesn't want to pay. I mean, you don't even bring in Ben Johnson, not even for an interview. You're the Dallas Cowboys. I'm from Detroit. So growing up, I'm very aware the Lions can't get anybody to be your head coach. The Cowboys can get anybody, because even with the Jerry Jones factor, you know how you offset that? You back up the Brinks truck. There is no salary cap on coaches. There's no reason the Dallas Cowboys don't have the most expensive coaching staff that has ever been heard of in sports. Everybody on their staff should be the highest paid there is, and it is far from the truth, or far from the case.
I talk about it all the time. Before you get to Howie, you got to talk about Jeffrey Lurie, because he puts together an organization where Howie can do what he needs to do to win. And to your point, there is no salary cap with off the field stuff. So the Eagles are bringing Joe Douglas back. They have Dave Caldwell here. They have 3 former general managers. Matt Russell, if we want to include him. They got all these personnel people, these bright personnel minds. Why? There's no salary cap. They can bring them in if they want to come in.
Right.
I think it starts with Jeffrey Lurie. And, Jerry's the best businessman when it comes to ownership in the NFL, Hall of Fame businessman, I always call him. Jeffrey Lurie is a Hall of Fame football owner. He really is.
And Jerry was like that. Jerry was like that early on because he was trying to fix the business. And so he was allowing Jimmy Johnson to do what he needed to do. And obviously Jimmy was great at what he did in that. And look at the success they had. And it probably should have went a lot longer than it did if the Eagles didn't get in the way. But there was a time when Jerry was that.
I love the conflation to the Herschel Walker trade. I'm like, well, yeah, but then Jimmy built off that. It wasn't just one thing. He just kept building and building and building. But always interesting and always fun to talk to John Machota.
Yeah.
I will
John,
see
one last question for you before I let you run, brother. If the Cowboys upset or spoil the Eagles banner night, all right, 2 days from now, give me the top 2 or 3 things they got to do to make that happen in this game.
Top 2 things for sure. The Eagles would have to come out and play sloppy on offense and turn the ball over. Matt Eberflus defenses do have a history of being able to force takeaways. And when I say that, it can't be like they lose the turnover battle 1-0. Like they would have to be like 3-0.
Last year, home opener, Eagles had 3 turnovers last year, home opener. Or
season season opener. It was in Brazil though. That can put, this game will be at Lincoln Financial Field, but it was a home game for the Eagles. But they did play sloppy. I'll tell you this, John, I don't think their starting 11 had one rep together. I'm talking about the Eagles in training camp. So to your point about not playing anybody, the Eagles played nobody in practice. You know, A.J. Brown woke up with a little bit of a tight hamstring, shut him down. Devontae Smith, groin, shut him down. Not one rep together. We're trying to figure this out, a group of us beat reporters together. I do not think they had one rep together with their starting 11 on offense. And they're going to roll them out there.
But at least with their offense, they brought it to a Super Bowl level. Whereas like with the Cowboys, you're working in the George Pickens thing. That's why, like, the other thing I was going to say is like the passing game would have to be playing at an elite level. So certainly George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, but kind of the sleeper in their passing game is going to be Kevontae Turpin, their kick returner, punt returner.
He's good. The Eagles are aware of him. Michael Clay won't stop talking about Turpin. Kick returner.
I'm firmly of the belief that when those meetings did happen that week before Brian was hired as head coach, when he was trying, because obviously when you're coming in for that meeting, you're trying to explain how you're going to make the offense better. Because you got to remember at this time too, when Brian gets the job, there's no George Pickens. You know, the belief was going into the draft, and it's not even a belief. This is the truth. If Tedoroa and McMillan falls to the Cowboys, he is the pick. So because they didn't get McMillan and they didn't love any of the other receivers, because they had plenty of guys that could be the 3-4 guys, they needed a number 2, a complement to CeeDee Lamb. So Brian didn't know that at the time. So I'm fully convinced that part of his sales pitch to Jerry was how much more Kevontae Turpin was going to be utilized in the offense, because it is ratcheted up each year he's been in the league. Yeah. But now I think it's to the point where he could probably, I think that third receiver is between him and their tight end, Jake Ferguson, in terms of like the most production. So that top 4 receiving options, and then Jalen Tolbert, you throw him in the mix too. That group, if it was clicking and they were able to somehow put up, 30 points, I think that would be their path to victory.
Yeah. It's a pretty good group. It's a pretty good group on paper for the Cowboys. So
yeah, if you can run the ball though.
Yeah, that's the
question. You know what I'm saying? When you got Devontae Williams and Jaden Blue, and some moving pieces on the O-line, like that's the thing. Like you can throw to open up the run, but like I've been telling everybody all offseason, like the game plan for me is simple against this Cowboys team. You put those safeties as far back as possible, and you dare them to try and win with the run game. There's no Ezekiel Elliott, DeMarco Murray, Emmitt Smith back there. Like you dare them, like, oh, let me see if your running game is on that level. Because you talk about not showing your starters in the preseason, like. We haven't seen Javonte Williams do anything when players are being tackled to the ground.
I full disclosure, I loved him coming out of college. I have to admit I wasn't right, but boy, I thought he was going to be a good back. And there were signs early, and hopefully they can tap into that. Oh, Netflix, real quick. Cherry Jones, the Netflix show. To your point about Micah Parsons in Green Bay, I think a lot of people forget, the Emmett, the Troy Aikman, and I've said this on the show, the Michael Irvin Cowboys, their biggest rival became San Francisco, because that's the team they had to get over the hump in the playoffs against. Their biggest rival, if they get back to that level, and I think the Eagles' biggest rival this year will become, it may be for a 3-4 year period, the Green Bay Packers, because of this trade. I cannot believe they traded him to the Green Bay Packers. I can't believe it, John. So I'll end it where I started it. More than the player moving, no, not that team. And they traded him to that team.
No, what, did Detroit not pick up the phone? I mean, that's the only way to me it gets worse.
Yeah.
If you put him opposite Aiden Hutchinson.
That would have been a real tragedy.
I mean, can you just imagine what that would have been?
As an Eagle fan, I would have been pissed at that one. John, thanks for doing it today, man. Make sure you guys follow him at John Machota. Read him at The Athletic and listen to his podcast. 1 star, 1 is spelled out. 1 star Cowboys podcast. John, thanks for joining the show, man. Excellent stuff. We'll look forward to reading you after the game. All right, brother?
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it. See you Thursday.
Here, great stuff there from John Machota. Awesome insight to the Cow. I always like to call it behind enemy lines, John. That was good insight there to the Dallas Cowboys. John, you were right about his perspective on covering the Cowboys. He's like, yeah, it's a lot, but I'd like to see some greatness maybe here and there, but he doesn't get any of that. Just
Yeah, well, he wasn't around for the greatness when
Yeah, right.
Jimmy Johnson was there, but they were truly great in that era. Different era though, but
Few of
yeah,
us were around, John. It's been a while.
I thought they Jerry conflated that with the Herschel Walker trade, which wasn't just one part. Then it just expanded, and they got more for Herschel Walker. Yeah, but I'm glad he agreed with me on the Packers part of it, because that to me is insane. That's the insane part of it. And again, that's an organization that generally makes good decisions. And they will do a better job accentuating having Micah Parsons. And he mentioned he went Packers, Eagles, Lions. I think he did it that way on purpose. I meant to clarify it, but he went Packers, Eagles, Lions. The Packers are going to be a freaking problem for people that don't realize.
I think Brian Gutekunst, John, was just flat out surprised that all it took was 2 1s in Kenny Clark.
Well, yeah, from his perspective, and you had to give up. You had to pay him $47 million.
Yeah, but again, I mean, this is a player game.
Well, it tells you what kind of player he is. When you pay somebody $47 million, you generally don't have to give up 2 first-round picks. But from the Packers' perspective, they're going to be, again, late picks. I'm saying 25 to 32. I'm being kind. They might be 32 this year.
Wow, you got really you think that team is?
They are a legitimate Super Bowl contender.
Gonna come down to Jordan Love, right? I mean, he's been a little bit of a streaky player.
Of course, you have to have the quarterback. I mean,
he has shown flashes. I got to give him that. He's shown major flashes, and he does have a great inherent skill set, but a little streaky for me.
Well, I agree with that, but they're playing a different style of football. In theory, again, the complementary nature, and this is what happened with Jalen last year. When you're playing from the lead, you can you don't have to take chances.
Right, exactly.
Now, there are quarterbacks that can't do that and scale it back. And, you have to see if Jordan Love is capable of doing that. But if they start having that type of season where they're playing from the lead and it's 14-0, here comes Micah Parsons pinning his ears back, becomes much easier for the quarterback than when he's trying to win close games or trying to come back on that last drive, and you might have to take a chance. It's a lot. The complementary nature of football is bigger than people realize when it comes to quarterback play.
It is. There's no doubt about it. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out. I thought John also gave some good insight just into, where the Cowboys are strong and what they're trying to do. I thought his comments on George Pickens were interesting. Dak is a good thrower of the football, John. I know Eagles fans are on his back because he can't seem to win in the playoffs and whatever the case may be, 9-10 years now, and only 2 playoff wins. But they added George Pickens. If they can block it all on the front, I think that tandem of receivers.
Well, I think that's positive for the Eagles is that Guyton's unlikely to play.
Yeah.
And even, Diggs might play, might not play. That's big for the Eagles because they're both full participants. So you say, all right, well, they're full participants on Monday, for a Thursday game. That would typically indicate they're going to play. Not the case, it seems, with Tyler Guyton. So Nate Thomas is, unproven player. But again, it's Alex Hunt. It's not Josh Sweat. So are the Eagles going to be fully able